his hand on a wet surface and slipped. The Nevada Democrat was treated at George Washington University Hospital and released. Mr. Summers says the 71-year-old Harry Reid planned to go to work today as usual. We'll find out. Now live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
Let us pray. Eternal Lord God, the Father of mercies, show mercy to our nation and world. In your mercy, give our senators a discerning spirit so that they will understand our times and know exactly what they should do. Lord, instruct them in knowledge that transforms, enabling them to guide others through exemplary living. Provide for their needs, lighten their burdens, and fill them with your joy. Refresh them with your presence as you equip them to serve you and humanity. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read the communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., May 4th, 2011. To the Senate. Under provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the state of New York, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in the period of morning business for debate only until 12 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the first hour equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the first 30 minutes and the Republicans controlling the next 30 minutes.
Madam President.
Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, the filing deadline for all second-degree amendments to S-493, the Small Business Jobs Bill, is at 11 a.m. There will be up to 2 roll call votes at noon. The first roll call vote will be on the motion to invoke cloture on S-493, the Small Business Jobs Bill. If cloture is not invoked on the bill, the Senate will immediately proceed to a second vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the nomination of John McConnell to be U.S. District Judge for the District of Rhode Island. Madam President.
Senator from Illinois.
I rise to speak as if in morning business. Madam President, hundreds of local first responders, 500 National Guardsmen, and hundreds of volunteers in southern Illinois are working around the clock to try to protect homes and communities from the rising waters of the Ohio River and other rivers in the region. I have a photo here which shows the devastation which I witnessed personally last Friday. This is an area in southern Illinois, one that has been hard-pressed economically, has been struggling, and now is inundated with flooding. A few days ago, when I visited Olive Branch in Cairo, Illinois, near the southern tip of the state, I saw this flooding firsthand. Homes, barns, and roads covered by floodwater. Voluntary evacuations have been called for in a dozen Illinois towns, and people are scrambling to find a place to stay with friends and family and shelters to wait out the flood. They worry about what will happen when they'll get back in their homes and when the kids are going to get back to school. This is another photo which demonstrates the kind of floodwaters that people are struggling with in my part of the world in southern Illinois. My colleague, Senator Kirk, was in southern Illinois over the last couple of days and has witnessed this firsthand as well. We're both prepared to do whatever we can to help our state and all the states in the region that have been affected by this terrible flooding. In many cases, this flooding is unfortunately going to be there for some time. One of the properties which I showed was in Cairo, Illinois. The water is already waist high and will continue to rise. It can be weeks before people can return home to see what, if anything, they can salvage. Now, late Monday night, the Army Corps of Engineers made a very difficult decision. They blew a hole in a levee on the Missouri side of the Mississippi River near Cairo, Illinois, to relieve pressure on the levee there and on other levees along the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. That decision will flood farmland, and that flooding will relieve some of the pressure on the towns and communities, the families and homes which have been threatened by these rising river waters. The decision to disable the levee at Bird's Point in Missouri, as difficult as it was, may have saved the lives of some of the nearly 3,000 people in Cairo, Illinois, and surrounding communities. There are early indications that the Army Corps plan is starting to work. The Ohio River has already dropped 1.5 feet at Cairo since 10 o'clock Monday night. Engineers estimate that the water level may go down as many as 7 feet as a result of the release of water at Bird's Point. I want to make it clear to the people of Missouri, to my colleagues from Missouri, that I will stand with them to make certain that there is compensation given to those farmers and homeowners who are affected by this decision to open this levee. Their misfortune is going to spare literally thousands of homes and businesses from the inundation of these floodwaters, and we should stand with them, just as if they were the victims of the original flooding itself. I'm thankful for the good news that the river levels are coming down, but the flooding's far from over. Water continues to rise in overtop levees throughout the southern part of my state. My heart goes out to the men and women piling sandbags, to the National Guard. Love them. God love them. Every time we have an emergency in our state, they are there, working night and day. Also to the men and women of the Army Corps of Engineers, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, and all of the agencies, federal, state, and local, that are pitching in. I stand ready with Senator Kirk to help in any way that we can in Illinois and back here in Washington over the next few days and weeks. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Republican leader.
I'm going to proceed on my leader time. The lawmakers returned to Washington this week amidst news of a signal achievement in the war on terror. We also returned to many critical debates about the situation right here at home. Gas prices are straining budgets and threatening to stall the economic rebound we've all been waiting for. Millions of men and women across the country still can't find a job. And the two major parties have now presented competing visions of our economic future. Republicans have shown that we are committed to creating an environment in which the private sector can flourish and create the jobs Americans need. As part of that effort, we've outlined a comprehensive jobs agenda yesterday. And today we'll oppose prematurely ending debate on the small business bill. The other side has refused to allow votes on some of the best ideas Republicans have offered for creating jobs as part of this legislation, including an important amendment by the ranking member of the Small Business Committee, Senator Snowe. And we intend to oppose their efforts to short-circuit this debate until these amendments are allowed. Republicans are also committed to stopping the administration's inexcusable war on American energy at a time of near-record gas prices. And we're committed to repealing the Democratic health care bill that is already raising costs and destroying jobs. But hovering above all of this is a growing fear about our nation's debt. The administration knows this. That's the reason tomorrow's debt meeting at the White House will occur. So this morning, I'd like to start right there, because anyone who's felt even the slightest twinge of pain from the recession has a vested interest in this debate. Here's why. If we don't act to reduce our debt, this country could very well experience a crisis that will make the economic meltdown of 2008 look like a slow day on Wall Street. That's not my conclusion. That's the conclusion of the Democratic co-chair of President Obama's own debt commission, a man who has spent the last year looking at the issue from every conceivable angle, and who's now telling anyone who'll listen that America faces, in his words, the most predictable economic crisis in history. Few of us saw the last crisis materialize. This one we can see. And a growing number of people now recognize that the upcoming vote on the debt limit provides us with the single best opportunity we have to avoid this crisis before it strikes. This is the moment to get serious about preventing this approaching crisis and to show the world that we can come together, and not for the sake of party, but for all Americans. The world is waiting for America to get its fiscal house in order. The fact that members of both major parties are now showing a willingness to do so is certainly an encouraging sign. But if we're actually going to do this, more Democrats in Washington have to acknowledge the problem and the urgency of addressing it right now in a serious way. Now, I realize that for some people that's a difficult thing to do. We're all grateful for the President's decisiveness over the weekend in going after Osama bin Laden. He's to be congratulated for it. Yet over the past 2 years, we've had many crises, and all too often it seemed the hardest decision for the President wasn't whether to solve the crises, but whether or not to give a speech about them. Last year, we waited for literally weeks to hear the President's position on one of the biggest ecological disasters in history. And throughout the past winter and spring, we waited to hear what he thought about a debt that had spiraled so out of control that America's economic outlook had been downgraded to negative for the first time ever. We can't wait for the President on this one. The consequences of sweeping our problems under the rug again are just too great. So let me be clear. As even some Democrats have conceded, a failure to do anything meaningful about the debt would be far, far more harmful to our economic future than a failure to raise the debt limit. Far more harmful. The warnings are simply too loud to ignore. In early 2008, most of us had no idea we were headed for a financial crisis. Surprised us all. Only a few prophetic voices were saying anything about the dangers in the housing market. Over the past few years, we've seen the painful consequence of that crisis. Unemployment lines, lost savings, millions of homes foreclosed. And despite this largely unforeseen economic catastrophe, the American people have dug in. They've worked harder. They've tried to drag the country back to fiscal health. It hasn't been easy, but they've struggled every day to get us back on our feet. What I'm saying this morning is that the danger posed by the debt is not uncertain. It's coming right at us. Right at us. It is, as the co-chair of the President's Debt Commission put it, the most predictable crisis in our history. And anyone who is more concerned about raising the debt ceiling than in using this debate as an opportunity to prevent this predictable crisis will answer for it. The American people will make sure of it. Now, some may continue to deny that we need to do something about the debt, that the only thing we need to do is to raise the debt limit and leave it at that. They want people to think this is all about some political exercise and that we all just vote according to the President's political affiliation anyway. Well, those days are over. Anyone who continues to pretend otherwise isn't just deluding themselves, they're deluding the American people as well. There isn't a single one of us who hasn't vowed to do everything in our power to prevent the next crisis from happening. Now we know for certain, absolutely certain, it's on the way, unless we act to prevent it. Raising the debt limit alone won't prevent this crisis. It simply avoids it. And that's why the only way we can claim we've actually done something meaningful in this debate is to insist on meaningful reforms as the price of our vote. Yes, we've had clean debt ceiling votes before. That was before S&P gave us a negative outlook for the first time ever and told us we risk a downgrade unless we get our fiscal house in order. That was before the world's largest private holder of U.S. Treasuries dumped its share of U.S. debt. That was before a commission that has spent a year studying this issue told us we're headed for ruin unless we act to prevent it. That was before this administration added trillions to the debt and submitted a budget plan this year that called for another $13 trillion in debt over the next 10 years alone. Madam President, the crisis is here. The time to act is now. We hear a lot from administration officials about what a catastrophe it would be if we didn't raise the debt ceiling. And there may very well be some merit to that argument. But what good would it do to raise the limit and wait for the disaster to strike? We might as well tell people to move to the second floor in case of a fire on the first floor. My constituents don't have the jobs to lose. Kentucky doesn't have the wealth to give away. We've seen the consequences of a recession we didn't predict. There's no excuse not to do everything in our power to prevent one we know is coming. So let me suggest a way forward in this debate. Number one, pitting one group of Americans against another isn't going to solve the problem. In fact, it's part of the problem. We all know it's going to take all of us working together to get out of this crisis, so why don't we start acting like it? Number two, there aren't enough taxes Americans, rich or poor, can pay to sustain the kind of spending Democrats in Washington want. The President may say he wants to tax the rich, but sooner or later he's going to have to tax everyone else to pay for his plans. What's more, we all know that raising taxes would stall the rebound we all claim we want. So let's just admit we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. Three, we all know entitlements need to be part of this discussion. It's about time everyone starts acknowledging it. I've seen the ads about lawmakers voting to end Medicare. Let's be honest and admit that nobody's talking about taking anybody's Medicare. Frankly, it's pathetic to claim otherwise, and it only makes the problems harder to solve. Four, let's discuss the art of the possible. We all know tax increases won't pass the House because of the damage they do to family budgets and businesses. And a bipartisan majority here in the Senate opposes raising taxes on families, on energy production, and small businesses across America. So let's set that aside and find common ground. Everyone has a stake in this debate. If we face up to it like adults, we'll not only prevent a crisis, we'll preserve our common way of life, and we'll show the world the United States can solve its problems head on. Millions of Americans are looking for work and struggling every day to rebuild their lives. Families and small businesses are being squeezed by gas prices and an administration that refuses to do anything about it. We'll have debates about this in the days ahead, and Republicans will continue to make the case for tapping our own energy resources. We'll make the case against new taxes and regulations and a health care law that's stifling jobs and creating new burdens. But all of these efforts rise or fall on whether we do something about our debt. It's time to show we can tackle the big stuff. The stakes are too high to let this debate come and go without acting. Denying the problem won't solve it. Avoiding the problem until the next election won't solve it. Giving speeches about the problem won't solve it. The time has come to act. I suggest the absence of. I was open.
Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, are we in morning business?
Morning business.
Okay, very good. I rise today to speak in support of the nomination of John McConnell to be the United States District Judge in my home state of Rhode Island. I had the occasion yesterday to be here on the floor and to associate myself with the remarks of my senior senator, Jack Reed, but I'd like to add some remarks of my own regarding how worthy an addition to the federal bench Jack McConnell will be, and to urge my colleagues to support his nomination and, in particular, to support an up or down vote on his nomination. The McConnell nomination has been reported on 3 separate occasions by the Senate Judiciary Committee, each time with a bipartisan vote. This bipartisan backing is not a surprise, given the broad support his nomination has found across the political spectrum in my home state of Rhode Island. I won't read all the quotes of support from prominent Republicans back home, but let me just touch on a few. Republican former Chief Justice Joseph R. Weisberger, an extraordinarily respected jurist of our state Supreme Court, stated, for example, that McConnell, and I quote, would be superbly qualified to preside as a federal judge over the most challenging and complex cases. He is a man of keen intelligence and impeccable integrity. He would be a splendid addition to the distinguished bench of the United States District Court of Rhode Island. Republican former Attorney General of Rhode Island, Jeffrey Pine, provides equally glowing reviews. I quote again, "Throughout his career, Jack has demonstrated the kind of legal ability, integrity, dedication to his client, and willingness to fight hard for the cause of justice that makes him a truly outstanding candidate for the federal judiciary. In my opinion, he would bring the kind of experience to the federal bench that would make him an outstanding judge presiding at trials and a fair and impartial arbiter for those who come before him." And I would add that Attorney General Pine's Republican predecessor as Attorney General, Arlene Violet, has been equally complimentary. John Harpootlian, the former Rhode Island Republican Party vice chair, has added, and I quote again, "One of the greatest characteristics that I admire about Jack so much is that despite political differences of opinion, he never allowed those differences to become personal or to cloud his judgment. As a result, we have always enjoyed spirited conversation regarding political issues, but have remained great friends. These characteristics lead me to unqualifiedly support Jack's confirmation to the United States District Court for Rhode Island." There has been similar support beyond the Republican Party from the editorial board of our state's leading newspaper, the Providence Journal, owned by the Texas Belo Corporation. Despite disagreeing with McConnell on major litigation he brought in private practice, the paper wrote not one, but 2 separate editorials supporting his nomination. The paper opined, for example, that, and I quote again, "Jack McConnell, in his legal work and community leadership, has shown that he has the legal intelligence, character, compassion, and independence to be a distinguished jurist." And the Providence Chamber of Commerce has weighed in to praise him as a, quote, "well-respected member of the local community." Jack certainly has richly deserved that title with all his various community service throughout the years, whether for Crossroads, Rhode Island, the state's largest homeless center, Providence's Trinity Repertory Theater, the Providence Tourism Council, or other organizations. In sum, those who know Jack McConnell as a lawyer and as a person recognize that he will be a great district court judge with a proper understanding of the limited judicial role. A native Rhode Islander and a graduate of Brown University, McConnell would make his state proud in his service on the federal bench, particularly at a time when our court is straining under the workload caused by the vacancy that he would fill. Unfortunately, out-of-state interest groups have politicized the McConnell nomination. I'm not going to spend time now rebutting every argument that these special interests and their well-paid lawyers have concocted to attack this nomination. Suffice it to say that Jack McConnell has answered all the questions posed to him by this body, leaving no doubt about his legal skill or his integrity. I will briefly make 2 points, however. One, yes, Jack McConnell brought lawsuits against powerful industries, tobacco, asbestos, lead paint. There is nothing wrong with that. There is no dishonor in representing poisoned kids, lung cancer patients, or the bereaved widow of a mesothelioma victim. It should not disqualify McConnell or anyone from confirmation. The most important measures of a judicial nominee are legal expertise, strong character, and a proper understanding of the judicial role. And those are qualities that Jack McConnell possesses in abundance. And yes, Jack McConnell has been active in politics, much like he has been active in many other aspects of Rhode Island public life. The question, however, is not whether he has been politically engaged in the past, but rather whether he will put aside his political advocacy when he goes on the bench. I know he will. My senior senator, Jack Reed, knows he will. McConnell testified before the committee that he would. And consider what Judge Bruce Selya of the First Circuit Court of Appeals, a Republican appointee, said when interviewed by the Providence Journal. I'll quote him. "It would be a terrible rule to say candidates should be excluded if they donate to their political parties in a perfectly legal fashion." The paper continued, describing its interview with Judge Selya. Selya said that when senators weigh the credentials of political contributors who are nominated to the federal bench, the proper question is not how much money did they give, but rather, can they make the transition from partisans to impartial jurists? The judge said he believes McConnell can do that. Judge Selya is not only a leading Republican jurist in Rhode Island, he is also a man of impeccable integrity, and his vouching for Jack McConnell is entitled to considerable weight among all those who know Judge Selya. We must not disqualify talented and successful advocates merely because of their prior legal or political advocacy. Some of my Republican colleagues may not like the suits that McConnell chose to bring. I do not share that view, but fair enough. We should remember, however, that lawyers we disagree with can make the transition from advocate to arbiter. Lawyers nominated by Republican presidents who defended corporations, all their private practices, simply do not have a monopoly over the proper judicial mindset. Let me make a last point before I close. The tradition of this body has been to give up or down votes to district court nominations reported favorably by the Judiciary Committee and that have the support of both home state senators. That is an important tradition in this body. Cloture has not historically been required. The Congressional Research Service reports that from 1949 to 2009, over 6 decades, only 3 cloture motions were ever made on district court nominations. And in each case, each nomination ultimately was confirmed without the 30 hours of post-cloture time being used. For every other district court nomination in that 60-year stretch, no cloture motion has been necessary. We've departed from that tradition in this case, and I fear it is a consequential departure. The majority leader has been forced to file a cloture motion on this nomination. I nevertheless hold out hope that our Republican colleagues will allow the motion to be withdrawn and grant an up or down vote to be held in short order. Doing so would be the proper course of action, in keeping with this institution's best traditions and most conducive to future comity on nominations. Indeed, it would be consistent with the clearly held and firmly stated views that my Republican colleagues have indicated in the past. So once again, I urge my colleagues to support the nomination of John McConnell to the United States District Court for the District of Rhode Island, to give deference to the judgment of Senator Reed and myself in this area, and at a minimum, to grant him the up or down vote that is Senate tradition for district court nominees backed by both home state senators who have emerged, in this case in bipartisan fashion, from the Judiciary Committee with the clearance both from the ABA and the FBI. Jack will be has proven himself to be an excellent lawyer and a public-minded citizen of the highest integrity, and he will be a great district court judge. I thank the presiding officer, and I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, I rise to join my colleague, Senator White House, in strongly supporting the nomination of John McConnell to the United States District Court for Rhode Island. Indeed, as my colleague indicated, there is a bigger issue here beyond Mr. McConnell. That is whether we are going to institute a new threshold which could be routinely applied to district court judges of a cloture vote. As my colleague indicated, this is an extraordinary departure from the history of this Senate, going back decades. We have long adhered to the tradition that local senators and the local legal community and the local civic community are the best judges for a potential nominee, subject to obviously the President's action, and quite importantly to the review by the American Bar Association, and quite importantly the background checks of the FBI, and quite importantly and very, very importantly to the deliberations of the Judiciary Committee here in the United States Senate. This has been a process for both Republicans and Democrats. It has extended over 6 decades, and it is something that I hope we can respect today through our deliberations and the conclusion of those deliberations. Turning to Mr. McConnell, we are fortunate, I believe, to have an individual of his talent and his character. Jack is a graduate of Brown University and Case Western Reserve Law School. He clerked for a justice of the Rhode Island Supreme Court. He has received numerous accolades and awards, such as the National Association of Attorney Generals President's Award, the Case Western Reserve University Martin Luther King Jr. Award. He's been named to numerous lists of the best lawyers. He has the top rating in both ethics and achievement from Martindale-Hubbell, which is the legal service that reviews practically and lists practically every attorney in the United States. But I don't simply want to repeat Jack's extraordinary resume of hard work and success. I want to share some personal judgments. He is a fundamentally and extraordinarily decent and honest person. He started out from very, very humble beginnings. He's worked hard for everything he accomplished in his life. And through his hours, not just of legal work, but of pro bono work and volunteer work, he has contributed more to the community than anyone I can think of in my home state of Rhode Island. And he's done it without fanfare. He's done it without self-promotion. He was raised by his late father, who was a career veteran of the United States Marine Corps. And his dad served in the Marine Corps Reserve for many years. His mother, Jane, was a teacher. And they demonstrated him the values of hard work and integrity and decency and honesty that have been the hallmark of his efforts. And while he was also juggling a very demanding legal career, a family and children, he took the time every Monday morning early to go to Amos House, which is a soup kitchen in Providence. It's where the poorest of the poor go simply to get some sustenance for the day. And he would quietly and anonymously serve breakfast without publicity, without fanfare, because he saw this as part of being a part of the community, someone responsible not just for personal success, but for contributing back, because he's been fortunate in his life. He was a big brother to a young man in the west end of Providence, another poor neighborhood. He's taught First Communion classes in his parish for years. He's been a volunteer intern at homeless legal clinics in Providence and Pawtucket, 2 of our central cities. And he's served on numerous boards. Crossroads, Rhode Island, the biggest and largest homeless service in the state of Rhode Island. He's been there, working hard, tirelessly. He's chaired the Providence Tourism Council. He's worked with the Providence Chamber of Commerce to promote the city of Providence. These are the types of attributes, life experiences, that form a person and also provide a predicate for a judge. Because the quality that I think we all have to look for in a person who is sitting in judgment of complicated civil cases, serious criminal cases, but ultimately cases involving ordinary men and women, is that they feel that that person understands them and will be fair to them, regardless of whether they're a large corporation or a poor person before the bar of justice. And I'm convinced he'll do that. Impartially, deliberately, carefully. These are the qualities that he has exemplified throughout his career. Jack enjoys strong support and broad support throughout the state of Rhode Island. And it's a reflection of his work, not just as an attorney, but as a civic leader. And I've heard of members from the business community, the Rhode Island judiciary, the legal community, Republican and Democratic elected officials, members of the clergy, as well as individuals from Rhode Island's nonprofit sector, from the academic sector. All of them have submitted letters for the record, which will make part of our record. But I just want to highlight a few. The Greater Providence of Chamber of Commerce called Mr. McConnell a well-respected member of the local community, leading important civic, charitable, and economic development institutions, including Crossroads, Rhode Island, the Providence Tourism Council, and Trinity Repertory Theater. They do not oppose his nomination. And I would, if I was looking at the business community, I would look at the local business community, not the national organized efforts, whose agenda sometimes is very far removed from the needs of the business, the small businessmen and women in Rhode Island. The Providence Journal, as my colleague has cited, has repeatedly editorialized in favor of his nomination. He has received emphatic and consistent endorsements. In May of 2010, they said, the Providence lawyer, John J. McConnell, Jr., whom President Obama has nominated to serve on the U.S. District Court for Rhode Island, is a very able attorney. He has also demonstrated much civic commitment and leadership as a very generous philanthropist and board member of various nonprofit organizations in our area. Furthermore, Jack McConnell, in his legal work and community leadership, has shown that he has the legal intelligence, character, compassion, and independence to be a distinguished jurist. Now, after no action was taken on Mr. McConnell's nomination by this body in the previous session, the Providence Journal wrote in November 2010 that Mr. McConnell is one of America's most able and successful litigators, has been a very energetic and generous leader in philanthropic activities and other parts of community life. His character and deep love of the law suggest strongly that he will function as a disinterested judge, when able to look at the facts of each case in the light of a close and rigorous reading of statutory and constitutional law and precedent. Indeed, his legal work and community leadership suggests that he would be a distinguished jurist. He is a man of tremendous character, recognized by community leaders. The Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence, an innovative organization in the south side of Providence, their executive director wrote in strong support. Rhode Island Supreme Court Joseph Weisberger, one of the most respected jurists in the history of Rhode Island, said of his nomination, his great experience as a litigator has given him exceptional knowledge of the intricacies of the rules and practice and procedures of federal courts. He would be superbly qualified to preside as a federal judge over the most challenging and complex cases. He would be a splendid addition to a distinguished bench of the United States District Court of Rhode Island. Judge Weisberger is a former Navy veteran and a 45-year veteran of the Rhode Island bench, and he is a man who commands enormous respect in Rhode Island. The Republican mayor of Rhode Island's second-largest city, Scott Avedisian, has said, Jack is a man of integrity, a strong sense of community, and a very fair and forward-thinking individual. And this is a Republican elected official, a very fair and forward-thinking individual. Business executive Merrill Sherman, an avowed believer in the free market, a very successful entrepreneur and banker, concluded Mr. McConnell has the temperament, demeanor, and capacity to be an excellent federal trial judge. So if Mr. McConnell is so bad for business, why are business leaders in the state reflecting on his qualities and giving him accolades and predicting that he will be a distinguished jurist. John Harpootlian, another major Republican attorney in the state, a distinguished attorney. In my view, however, the most important attribute is integrity. Time and time again, Jack has proven that he's a man of great principle and integrity. While being a vigilant advocate for his clients and the causes he has taken up during his professional career, Jack has always conducted himself in the most ethical and professional manner, a trait unfortunately sometimes not found among lawyers today. And one of the greatest characteristics I admire about Jack is that he's never allowed any type of differences, and this is Mr. Harpootlian's words, he's never allowed those differences to become personal or to cloud his judgment. I'm hard-pressed again to believe that the suggestions that have made that in some way Mr. McConnell is not a completely ethical person, scrupulously ethical, because every bit of evidence from Rhode Island, Republicans, Democrats, lawyers, business leaders, for a lifetime of observation suggests this. But perhaps the most compelling words are the words of a former Rhode Island Republican Attorney General, Jeff Pine. As Jeff concluded, quote, "There is no question in my mind that Jack would be an honest, principled, ethical, and fair judge. He would be a credit to our state and judiciary. I enthusiastically support his candidacy for the position on the federal bench." And this is our former Republican Attorney General. And if that judgment is not sufficient, let me render another judgment. And this is in the form of a colleague, a former Pennsylvania Attorney General, a Republican, who is now a member of the U.S. Court for the Third Circuit. This body, at the recommendation of the Pennsylvania senators years ago under President George W. Bush, nominated and confirmed unanimously Michael Fisher to serve, after distinguished service as a Republican Attorney General in Pennsylvania, as a circuit judge. And here is what Judge Fisher says. "I met and worked with Mr. McConnell when I was the elected Attorney General of Pennsylvania from 1996 to 2003. We worked very closely together on the national tobacco litigation and worked closely with Mr. McConnell. We spent considerable time together in New York and at meetings elsewhere, and I had the unique opportunity to assess Mr. McConnell's legal abilities and his character, which were both outstanding. John J. McConnell, Jr. is an outstanding nominee to serve on the U.S. District Court for the District of Rhode Island, and I enthusiastically support his nomination." And these are the words of a federal circuit judge nominated by George W. Bush and confirmed unanimously by this Senate. Again, I implore my colleagues to listen to what people who know Jack McConnell have said and the words they've used: integrity, honesty, character, independence, impartiality. Those are the words of people who know them. That is the truth. Now, I urge not only in the merits but also in terms of the traditions of this Senate that we allow this vote to come to final passage and we vote for Mr. McConnell. But let me turn briefly to the claims made by some. And frankly, I'm a little bit leery to address these supposed criticisms, but they've been leveled and I think there should be some response. The first claim seems to be that Mr. McConnell is anti-business. Well, outside of the support he's received from business leaders in Rhode Island and the Providence Journal, which has a historic reputation going back several centuries of being a prominent supporter of business in Rhode Island, I think it's also good to reference the fact that two insurance industry trade associations, the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies and the Property Casualty Insurance Associations of America, originally signed a letter in 2010 that stridently attacked Mr. McConnell. However, in December of 2010, both of these associations, which represent companies that scrupulously work for their shareholders, withdrew their opposition because they stopped and looked at the facts. They spoke to the Rhode Island Insurance Company members. They examined the Republican support that I have cited for Mr. McConnell. They've listened to what the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce had to say on the matter. And to quote from the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies' letters, "Upon further consideration and consultation with our member companies in Rhode Island and after evaluating support for Mr. McConnell from the local business community and former Rhode Island Attorney General Arlene Violet, a Republican Attorney General, and Jeffrey Pine, NIMIC withdraws its opposition to his nomination. Again, here it is. Those who have carefully considered Jack McConnell have acknowledged that he will bring no personal agenda to the courtroom and that he has testified truthfully and accurately. Another insinuation is that Mr. McConnell has not comported himself in an ethical manner. This is a serious charge, but if anyone is going to level such an assertion, that they have to have, I think, clear and compelling facts on their side. Indeed, in the 2 decades of practice, Mr. McConnell has never had an ethics complaint alleged or filed against him. He has never had a malpractice claim filed against him. He has never had a Rule 11 motion filed against him.
The Senator's time has expired.
I would request unanimous consent for an additional 2 minutes.
Is there objection? No objection.
Thank you, and I think...
If there's additional, reserving the right to object, we would need to add 2 minutes to the Republican time.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, there's a third claim against Jack McConnell regarding a lead suit that he instituted against lead paint manufacturers. Let me just, for the record, state that this process was initiated by Republican Attorney General Jeffrey Pine. It was continued by 2 succeeding Attorney Generals. It was a lengthy and difficult trial. Judge Silverstein, the state Supreme Court justice who oversaw this trial and responsible for the court business calendar, had nothing but praise for Mr. McConnell's involvement. And again, Judge Silverstein is one of our most respected by all sides and by the entire Rhode Island bar for his judgment, his integrity, and his skill. He had nothing but praise for Mr. McConnell's involvement and that of opposing counsels. A fourth claim is an insinuation that he's received some type of favoritism in the awarding of this contract to serve the state. But the truth is it began under Attorney General Jeff Fine, a Republican, who asked him, after working with him on the tobacco case, to consider his efforts with respect to possible damages regarding lead paint exposure. It was continued further by succeeding Attorney Generals, including my colleague, Senator Whitehouse. This whole process was reviewed by an outside firm, Decoff and Decoff. They found that there was credibility to go forward. Mr. McConnell was retained. It was reviewed by Senator Whitehouse's successor, Attorney General Lish. He continued the arrangement. And I'm also told that this proposed arrangement was submitted to the court, that the court reviewed it, did not object to it, and that I'm also indicated by Senator Whitehouse that indeed the judge had the final approval of any type of payments made. That's a type of contract that I think is well within the consistency and the ethics of procedures within Rhode Island and across the nation. Now, I could go on and on and on, but I want to just conclude by saying this is an individual of integrity, of character, of decency, of dedication, of talent and skill. Today, we are on the verge, I hope, of confirming a district judge. If we reject this person through a cloture fight, we are setting up an extraordinarily dangerous precedent that in the future could be used indiscriminately to once again implicate individuals of character and talent that deserve to serve on this bench. And with that, I would yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Madam President, I ask consent that over the next 30 minutes, Republican senators led by the senator from Ohio, Senator Portman, and including the senator from Wyoming, Senator Cornyn from Texas, Senator Hoeven from North Dakota, be permitted to engage in a colloquy.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. It seems as if every day there's some new action by the Obama administration which throws a big wet blanket over job creation in America. Republicans haven't been hesitant to point this out, to talk about too many taxes, too many regulations, too much debt, $4 gasoline, high tax energy prices, a health care law. Even yesterday, Senator Graham and Senator DeMint and I introduced legislation to reaffirm Section 14B of the Taft-Hartley Act to permit states, if they should so choose, to have a right-to-work law, creating a competitive environment in which we can create more jobs in this country. This is in reaction to an action by the National Labor Relations Board that would basically say that the Boeing company couldn't expand into a non-union state. And I ask unanimous consent to include in the record, following my remarks, an editorial in the Wall Street Journal today called "The Congress versus the NLRB."
Without objection.
But as important as it is for us to say what we don't like about the Obama administration's job policy, it's even more important for us to say what Republicans will do to create an environment to make it easier and cheaper to create private sector jobs. Senator Portman of Ohio has a strong background as a budget director, as a congressman, as a trade negotiator in the Bush administration, and a good understanding representing one of our largest and most important manufacturing states of exactly what kind of policy it takes to create an environment for job growth. He's been working for the last several weeks with Republican senators so that we could clearly say what our pro-growth job plan is. And today, with the help of other senators, we'd like to discuss that. So I ask Senator Portman, what would be the keys to a Republican plan to make it easier and cheaper to create private sector jobs?
Well, I thank my colleague from Tennessee, and I happen to have an answer to his question. Yesterday, he's correct, we did propose a jobs plan, which is a series of common sense proposals to get our economy back on track and to create jobs across our country. You will recall that a few years ago there was a stimulus effort here in the United States Congress. The President's $800 billion stimulus plan was passed, and the idea there was to get the economy back on track. There were estimates that it would have a big impact on job growth and in fact, reduce our unemployment numbers significantly. That didn't happen, and I think one of the reasons it didn't is because it relied too much on government providing the resources for jobs. Government doesn't create jobs, but government can create the climate for job growth. So our view is we need to take a different approach, and that approach is to stimulate private sector job growth through creating that pro-growth environment. The 7 proposals that we announced yesterday, which are part of our jobs plan, include being sure that we do indeed deal with the deficit and the debt, because that is a negative impact today on our economy. And in fact, there are economic studies out there showing that our GDP is much smaller than it would otherwise be but for the deficit and the debt, but also to reform our tax code to make it more competitive. Economists across the spectrum agree that we can help stimulate economic growth by having a tax code that makes more sense for job creation. Certainly regulations is a major issue we'll hear about today from some of my colleagues, and being sure we have regulatory relief, particularly for small businesses who are not able to create jobs because of the increasing costs of regulations coming from Washington. And then a workforce that's more competitive requires the federal government to do a better job on workforce development. We also hear today about the need to expand exports. The President has talked about that. We are eager to get these trade opening agreements here in Congress so we can create hundreds of thousands of new jobs and create them immediately through expanding markets. We talked about energy yesterday. This is incredibly important. There are things we can do right now to get America less dependent on foreign oil and using our own resources here in this country more effectively. And then in terms of the health care situation, we'll talk about this in a moment. Every business person I talk to in Ohio, and I've been to over 200 factory visits now in the last couple of years, tells me that the cost of health care are going up, not down, and making it harder to create jobs in Ohio and across the country. So we're going to talk a little about the need for us to reduce health care costs. So this is a common sense 7-point plan to get the economy moving again, to create jobs. It's incredibly important to us to get the unemployment numbers down, which is way too high, to be sure American families have opportunities. It's also very important, though, in terms of dealing with the debt and deficit, because although we need to restrain spending, and Congress is beginning to take small steps in that regard, we also need to grow the economy. And when you have 1.8% economic growth, which we had in the last quarter, which is anemic, which is weak, which is not something any of us should be satisfied with, it's very difficult to create that economic growth to help deal with this huge overhang of deficits and debts. So, as the gentleman from Tennessee said, we're honored today to have some of our colleagues here with us today. We have Senator John Hoeven from North Dakota, who has come on the floor to talk a little about these issues. Also, Senator Barrasso from Wyoming is here, and Senator Cornyn has just joined us from Texas. And I would like to ask Senator Hoeven, who is a former governor of North Dakota, a state where there's actually about 3.5% unemployment, I believe, and a state that is producing domestic energy to help meet our needs, and also a big state for exports. If he would talk a little about his ideas on job growth and how it fits into this jobs plan. Senator Hoeven.
Madam President, Senator Portman, Senator Alexander, Senator Cornyn, Senator Barrasso, really great to be here this morning to engage in this colloquy. And I do want to follow up on the points that my esteemed colleague referred to, both energy and trade. They are very important in terms of job creation for our country. But if I could just start for a minute on the comprehensive nature of this jobs plan that Republicans have put together. If you look at it, you'll see it truly is comprehensive. It's about living within our means. It's about reforming our tax code without raising taxes to create a pro-growth environment, to create jobs and get our economy moving. It's about unburdening our economy from over-regulation that is hurting job creation. It's about helping to create a more competitive workforce to compete in a global economy. It's about increasing our exports. It's about a truly comprehensive approach to energy that will help us develop all of our sources of energy, both traditional and renewable, and it's about common sense health care reform. We need to do that because we have more than 15 million people that are unemployed. And every day they're unemployed is one day too many. And we also have to get on top of this deficit and this debt that we face. And that means controlling our spending, reducing our spending, but it also means growing our economy. That's the way to not only get people back to work, but to reduce the debt and deficit. If you look back at the 90s, when we were in a somewhat similar situation, that's exactly what we did. And we need to go back to work and do it. In our state, North Dakota is a large energy-producing state, both traditional sources of energy, oil and gas, the clean coal technologies, but also the renewables, the biofuels and wind. But the way we did it wasn't through government spending. It was through creating a legal, tax, and regulatory environment, creating certainty so that companies and entrepreneurs could invest. They could invest in energy and advanced manufacturing and technology-based business, the whole gamut. But there are hundreds of millions to billions of dollars today that would go into investments all over this country in the energy patch. Again, both traditional sources of energy and renewable sources of energy with the latest, greatest technology, more energy, more dependably, more cost-effective, with better environmental stewardship, if we just create the right environment. That's what this plan is all about, creating that right environment. By the same token, we're looking at 3 different trade agreements right now. The Korean Free Trade Agreement, Colombia, Panama. These will create more economic activity. The Korean agreement alone is expected to increase United States exports to South Korea by $10 billion a year. We're talking hundreds of thousands of jobs. We need to be working on those free trade agreements right now, today, to approve them. And so I urge our leadership, I urge the administration to work with us to get those trade agreements to the floor. We get them approved as part of this comprehensive jobs plan. And, Madam President, I want to again thank my esteemed colleagues. I certainly want to commend Senator Portman for his outstanding work on this plan, and thank all of the members of our caucus for the contributions they've made to this plan, and also, again, express our desire to go to work with our friends across the aisle on all of these provisions for the benefit of all of those who are looking for work, for the benefit of our economy, and for the important role that that economic growth, along with spending restraint, will play in helping us get on top of our debt and deficit. And with that, I'd like to, Madam President, turn the colloquy back to Senator Portman for his additional remarks.
I thank my colleague from North Dakota. He made some great points regarding the need for us to use our resources here at home on energy and for us to expand exports, because that immediately creates jobs in this country. He's done it. As a governor, he rolled up his sleeves and got directly involved in economic development. He knows what it takes. And the fact that he's been a champion for this plan and helped put it together gives me confidence that this is going to work. And we need to work, as you said, on a bipartisan basis. We're reaching out to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and we should do now. We're also joined by our colleague from Wyoming. He's Wyoming's doctor. He is also a leader here in the Senate and has taken the lead on a number of issues related to jobs, two of which are part of the jobs plan here. One is, of course, the regulatory front, where he has taken the time to really dig into how these regulations affect business growth. And he may have some comments on that today, and I'd love to hear yours on that, Dr. Barrasso, but also on the health care front, where as a doctor he's looked into what the impact will be of the health care reform on jobs. And this is something that perhaps doesn't get talked about enough. Unless we figure out a way to get our health care costs under control, it'll be harder and harder for us to create opportunity here in this country, because the costs that are embedded in hiring a new employee under health care alone are so high that many companies simply aren't hiring. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Dr. Barrasso.
Well, thank you very much. And Madam President, I just want to thank Senator Portman.